How's it going, everybody? My name is Justin, and I'm just a gringo trying to turn himself into a Latino. And today what I want to talk to you specifically about is reading, and I want to talk to you specifically about the books by Olly Richards. Now, if you don't know who Olly Richards is, he's a polyglot, he's a teacher, he's an author, he's got a YouTube channel, really interesting guy, really great content that he puts out on his YouTube channel. Love everything that he's doing. Now, Olly's a really interesting guy because he's learned somewhere in the range of like 8 languages and written something like 30 books or something like that, which is really incredible. Obviously, I'm interested in his books in Spanish, which he's written a bunch of. Now, I've got 5 of them that I want to show you guys today and show you how I am using them to help improve my Spanish. So I'm just going to jump right in here and I'm going to show you guys my entire collection of Olly Richards books. So these are 5 of his books. He's got a few more in Spanish, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. I want to make sure that I get through these, and then I might end up going back to the other ones. So now there's a few different things here. So let me kind of explain to you what it is that he is doing with each of these different books. So I've got the first 2 here are his books of short stories. Okay, so his books of short stories, where these are actually kind of chapter books, chapter short stories, where he's got short stories that are about 3 chapters long. Each chapter is maybe 5 pages, 6 pages, something like that. And they're really, really good for learning new vocabulary, and he gives you a good outline on how to actually use these. So in his book, he tells you about this 6-step reading plan. I think it's really important to kind of follow that plan along, especially initially as you are first kind of picking up reading and things like that. For this one, this was his beginner one. I read this one first. I've gone all the way through the whole thing, and basically I've learned a ton of vocabulary and a ton of grammar structure through this book. It's really, really great. Now, the cool thing about this is that it gives you a chapter summary at the end of every chapter, and it also gives you a comprehension quiz at the end of every chapter as well. So you can kind of test and see how much are you actually understanding of what you're reading. Now, Olly really encourages extensive reading over intensive reading. Now, what's the difference between these two things? Extensive reading is where you're reading for fun, for pleasure, for completion, just to enjoy the story. There's also intensive reading. Intensive reading is where you're literally picking apart every aspect of the story. You're picking apart words that you don't know, phrases that you don't know, grammar structures that you've never seen, and you're literally trying to figure it out all the way through as you go through the story. Olly does not recommend this. He recommends reading for pleasure, and over time, and with a lot of repetition of reading for pleasure, what you're going to find is that over time you are going to just acquire the language, just like we would as kids, just like we would when we're reading in our own native language as well. Now, if you want to follow his 6-step reading plan, what he does talk about is making sure that you read the first time through every chapter just for fun, just for completion, just to see what your comprehension ability is and see how you can gather things from the context. Then he recommends going back and reading it again. And I definitely highly recommend that you go back and read it a second time, because you will pick up new things on the second pass. Now, I personally was going back and reading it a 3rd time because I wanted to make sure that I was getting it all down. And on that 3rd pass, I was definitely reading a little bit more intensively, trying to pick things apart and understand the way that things are being said, the words that are being used, and all of that. So I was also reviewing, because at the end of every chapter he's got a vocabulary list. So if you look here at the end of the chapter, he's got basically a chapter summary. So if you can see that, he's got a chapter summary here, and then he's got a vocabulary list here, as well as comprehension questions on the other side. So I've found that these books are incredible, and the way that I use them is just like I said. I'm going to read through every chapter 2 or 3 times to really try and understand these. Okay, so I read the beginner one first, and then the intermediate one after that. I'm about halfway through this one, so I'm still working my way through. Now, changing gears just a little bit, I've got his 101 Conversations series right here, and these are really interesting because it is literally conversations between people. Now, there are obviously conversations going on in this too, but it's a story. You're really just trying to see and and understand a story where, yes, there may be some conversation between, but overall it's just one story kind of put together. This is literally just conversations between people. And so I am a big fan of these. I just got these recently, but I'm using these slightly differently. So you can see that I've got 101 conversations in Mexican Spanish. Now the reason I chose Mexican Spanish is because I live in the United States, which is very close to Mexico. There are a lot of Mexican people in my city and around my city and things like that. So I feel like I should probably learn the lingo a little bit more of Mexican Spanish. Now I'm using this one by reading one story per day, and I realize it's going to take me 101 days to get through, but that's fine. I just want to kind of gradually work my way through this one so that I can kind of understand the story a little bit, but just kind of enjoy this as I move my way through. I've even had a friend from online who's actually been reading it, and I've been listening to the audio of it so I can hear the way it's spoken and hear it at a normal pace as well, which has been really fun and really interesting. But with this one, I'm reading this one a little bit more extensively on the first pass, and then I go back through and I read it a second time a little bit more intensively, not too much, because there's not as much to each of these chapters. So if you look at these chapters, this is literally the whole chapter. So this is the conversation right here on this side, and then a little bit on this side. So it's literally a page and a half plus a vocabulary list. So basically what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm reading it one time through on my own, just extensively, not looking anything up. Then I look at the vocab list and try and understand those words that I didn't understand in the vocab list. And then I go back through and read it a second time. You can see this is really short, so it doesn't take you very long to do. So for me, I ended up reading these 2 times through, one story per day, or one conversation per day, and that seems to be working really well for me. I like that a lot. Now on the other hand, I'm reading this one slightly differently. So 101 conversations in social media Spanish. This is really interesting because it follows a group of like college age kids that are going out for a night on the town, and they are going to an escape room. So if you know what an escape room is, it's a fun time that you can do with friends. Basically what happens is the people get split up into 2 separate escape rooms, and something happens with one of the groups, and there's all this texting and WhatsApp messaging and Facebook messaging and Telegram messaging and things like that are going on. And it's really interesting to see how people are using these different platforms and in a different language. Now there's also a little bit of drama between this boyfriend and girlfriend, and apparently the guy is cheating on the girl, and she's getting suspicious and all this other kind of stuff. So it's kind of entertaining. So the way that I'm reading this one is completely different than the way that I'm reading the 101 Conversations in Mexican Spanish. I'm reading this one basically at a pace of 5 to 10 chapters per night, because I'm trying to kind of get through this one, and this is completely reading extensively because it's fun, it's interesting, it's a story that is kind of captivating and has a little bit of drama to it, so I've really enjoyed it. But you kind of want to get through it and just reading for enjoyment, completely extensively, not going back and looking things up at all. Just reading through 100% extensively and really enjoying every aspect of that. And the final book that I've got is this one. And this is his 30-day mastery series, and he's got a few of these and a few different topics. But for me, I am trying to learn a little bit more about the subjunctive. Obviously, this is a topic that is pretty difficult for us English speakers because we have the subjunctive in English, but we just don't use it all that much. So this has been kind of helpful and useful in trying to help me learn about the Spanish subjunctive, because this is tough material, but he still teaches it through story, which is really, really cool. Now obviously in the beginning of the book he gives like a lesson of 3 to 5 pages, somewhere in there, on the Spanish subjunctive. How do you conjugate it? When do you use it? All this kind of stuff. But then the rest of the book is 100% in story and talking to you and showing you examples of how this would actually get used in conversation in a story. So the way that I'm using this one is a little bit differently. So I'm reading 2 chapters a night, and basically the way that I'm doing that is that on day 1 I read 1 chapter, chapter 1. And then on day 2, I read 2 chapters, chapter 1 again, and then chapter 2. And on day 3, chapter 2 again, and then chapter 3. So basically I'm going back and reviewing the chapter from the day before. Now I'm doing this extensively, but also I am really trying to pick this one apart a little bit more intensively because of the complexity of the subjunctive. I'm trying to understand when, how, and why to use the subjunctive in a sentence, in a paragraph, in a story, and however I'm going to use it in daily life. So this has been really good. I'm about 4 chapters into this at this point, so I haven't quite gotten deep into it. So I don't feel like I've improved a ton at this point at my ability to use the subjunctive, but hopefully over a 30-day period, I will at least have a pretty decent understanding of how to use it. So that's all I've got for you guys today. So here it is, the 5 books that I own by Olly Richards. You might call me a bit of an obsessive kind of person in this regard, but I think he's really doing some good work, and I think that his books are really worth getting if you want to start to learn Spanish in a more fun way, because I really enjoy learning through story rather than learning by textbooks or vocabulary lists or things like that. So I found that this has been very helpful, very good for my learning process. So I hope you guys have a fantastic day and enjoy all these books. I'm going to put a link in the description below to each one of these books in Amazon so that you guys can go and pick them up if you are interested. So head on out there, keep learning, and I hope you have a great day. Nos vemos.